Okay, so I'd like to kick it over first to Dr. David Newman, who is our interim provost. Dr. David Newman, sorry, Dr. Newman, can you tell us a little bit about how the academic year has been? It is already week 4 at the college, and just share a little bit of perspective and also maybe a little bit about what spring semester is going to look like. I know those are kind of the key comments we've been receiving.
Good evening. As Laura said, my name is David Newman. I've been at ESF now for 13 years. I previously had been chair of the Department of what is now Sustainable Resources Management, and I became provost about 1.5 years ago. In looking at sort of how this semester has gone, we've been, I would have to say, very pleasantly surprised. To date, we've given over 2,000 tests for COVID and have had 0 cases. We had 1 case that came from New York City, a graduate student who isolated herself before she got to campus, never came on campus. And so we've had really remarkable success. At the same time, Syracuse University, which has given out about 20,000 tests, right now has 5 cases that are being quarantined. So we feel very, very fortunate that New York State has a very low level of the COVID occurring, and that's been reflected in our numbers. The other thing, it isn't just what's been happening in the state. There's also the fact, I believe our students are very mature, that they understand what they're involved with here and have taken all the guidance that we've been given very, very seriously. You go on campus, everyone wears a mask, social distancing is maintained, and we feel really very positive about how the semester is going. Obviously, it can change in a hurry, as we've seen at some of the other institutions around the state, but we feel very hopeful that through the pretty strong diligence that we've been doing with respect to testing, that we'll be able to make it through. There were some people at the beginning who thought we wouldn't be able to make it even 2 weeks, and I always thought we could. And in fact, what's happened is because of our attention to detail, because of all the work that we did before the school year started, we feel we're in a very good place with respect to being able to make it through this semester. So that's really good news. As you probably know from your children, that we've had to change the modalities quite a bit with regards to how we teach. About a little bit over half of the courses we teach, or the individual classes that we have, are fully online. We had to do this to a large extent for all of our large classes over 100 students, because frankly, we don't have a classroom large enough to handle social distancing and staying within the state guidelines of not having more than 50 people in a space at the same time. So right now, our largest teaching space holds about 40 or 42, somewhere in there. And so our large classes are all online, but we've tried to maintain for our labs that students have the opportunity for face-to-face, and it works out like a little bit over half of the classes are fully online. About 40% are partially online, in which students either, we call them a hybrid flex, where half of the class is in person and the other half of the class is watching online, and then there's about 10% that are just fully face-to-face. And so we feel we feel positive about this. We've done our best to maintain face-to-face opportunities for our students. We knew that for some students, it was going to be likely that almost all of their classes were going to be online. Unfortunately, particularly for our freshmen, they're often the classes that they're having to take are large lecture classes with labs. And so the labs are face-to-face, but the lectures are going to be online. And so we're working through that. We did offer the opportunity for students, if they were going to be in a situation in which all their courses were online, that they could opt out of having residential learning. For non-freshmen, that led to a fairly small reduction in fees. For those freshmen who took advantage of that opportunity, it meant that they didn't have to pay for living in the dorm the first year or the first semester. And so about 280 or so students out of the about 1,700 students that we have, undergraduate students, took advantage of that option. Again, we've been able to, because so many students have online courses, we've been able to maintain quite a bit of social distancing. The campus is not very congested. And so again, we feel fairly confident that on campus, the students are very, very safe, that we've been able to provide a good learning environment for those students that are on campus, and that crowding and the other concerns that we might have had really don't seem to be apparent. And so, yeah, so overall, we feel pretty good about where the campus is sitting right now. As you know, we had to change the schedule in order for us to make this semester work. And this one is going to be a real challenge on our students, that we're not going to be having a fall break at all. Students are going straight through the whole semester until the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, at which point the students can go back home, and their final exams will be done online. This is, again, we're going into new territory for us here, but we really didn't want to have the situation of students going away for a fall break and then having to come back onto campus for a short period of time. We felt that was much safer. We still haven't decided sort of what spring semester is going to look like. Our expectation is that spring semester will look an awful lot like this fall semester. As long as the state still has its guidelines that we can't have more than 50 people in a room, and we have to maintain 6-foot social distancing between people in classrooms, we don't have any choice about taking our larger lecture classes online. And the only question really we're dealing with right now is, or there's like two questions. One is when we will start the semester. Right now, I believe it's January 19th. We may push that back a week to January 26th. But the other thing is whether, in fact, we'll do spring break. Spring break for us, again, is a fairly scary situation of students going who knows where, and then having to come back to campus and deal with potential quarantines and potential problems of bringing things back on the campus. And so we've been in discussions with Syracuse University because we work to get our schedules to coincide. They have to coincide. Probably half of our students are taking classes over at Syracuse University, so we have to be working together with regards to things like scheduling. So like I say, right now we're not clear on that. We'll still be into we'll still be in discussions with Syracuse University, and we'll have that information probably sometime around the end of October or so, as students are registering for their spring classes. Right now, we're putting the schedule together for spring semester. And so when the students are signing up for their courses, they'll know the teaching modality that we're going to be using, whether it's going to be online, whether it's face-to-face, or whether it's the hybrid. So again, we're hopeful and feel pretty positive about how things have been going. And those were the main things that I was going to talk about, and I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Laura, do you want to ask any questions that they may have for me?
Yes, sure. A question that came in while you were speaking was about how a first-year student can get to know his, her, their. Thank you for the use of the pronouns. Thank you very much. Professors, when face-to-face time is so limited. So do you have any advice for parents and families to help navigate communicating with faculty?
You know, it's kind of an interesting situation. My daughter just she graduated this past year from Binghamton University, and she's starting a Master of Public Health program at Albany. And all of her courses are online, and this is the exact problem that she's having with her instructors at Albany, of how do I'm confused, what do I do? So there's a couple ways of dealing with this. One is, this is a different situation for both our faculty and our students. And so our faculty are still learning how to work in an online environment. And the students have differing desires and needs with respect to learning in that environment. I'm a firm believer in communication, and our faculty are expected to have office hours, and that students, whether they set it up as a Zoom or whether they're just answering emails, your students should be sending email questions to the faculty member. We don't have at times a lot of opportunities for face-to-face meetings with students because of concerns about social distancing, and for many of our faculty, their offices are rather small, and therefore they're not able to maintain social distancing. And so what your students should be doing is sending emails to their instructor, and letting them know their concerns, and then the instructor can either respond as an email, set up a Zoom call with the student, and do something to try and deal with those issues. Many of our courses also have teaching assistants, and the teaching assistants are also available to answer questions. And so it's going to be a challenge at first for students to break down their initial shyness about contacting their instructors. There's often a problem with that. And for faculty to figure out the best way to respond to questions that students may have. Laura did share this question with me, and I'm going to share this with the faculty chairs, because I think it's something we haven't been as cognizant of, and we do need to pay attention to this for our students.
Thank you for that. I do see some other questions that you might be able to answer. So we got a kudos about the COVID, having 0 COVID-19 case counts.
Yep.
So we had a bill question, which I think that maybe Mark can answer that when you speak about it, and maybe it not being available or viewable in Banner. But so will there be, Dr. Newman, will there be any classes offered between the fall and the spring semesters that you're aware of?
Again, this is a problem of access. In the past, we have offered some courses, particularly like within our wildlife program, a winter mammalogy course that was held up at Huntington Forest. uh, and that may be possible. Other than that, we generally don't offer courses, a lot of courses during that time period. Admittedly, this year, and that's been historically driven because we generally only had less than a month between the end of fall semester and beginning of spring semester. This year, we may have close to 2 months between the end of fall and the beginning of spring, at least on the campus. And so there may be some possibility, but right now, I haven't heard from any plans for courses between fall and spring. Historically, and this is part of the concern, often like during spring break, we've had at times international options for students, but I don't think we're going to be having any of that this year, since we may not even have a spring break, but the likelihood of doing international travel this year is probably pretty slim.
Okay, thank you for that. I did see a question about field trips. So can you talk a little bit more about how many classes are on field trips? And
so our policy right now is that bus capacity is reduced by 50%. So for a 15-seat van, we're operating 6 or 7 students in it. And so this has made a lot of our field courses much more challenging. A 44-seat bus is only holding 22 people. And so that's been our challenge. We still are doing field courses, but a number of faculty, because of this difficulty of travel, have been using basically taping their field exercises using GoPros or other cameras and putting together their field labs that way. Is it what we want to do? No, we'd much rather have this opportunity to be able to have students go out in the field and learn in the field. But transportation has been a challenge. Another thing that some faculty have been doing, or a number of faculty, we've been using the cemetery, which is a pretty expansive area right next to campus, so we don't have to do any driving. We've been using Thornton Park. The landscape architecture program, which has moved downtown as we prepare the reconstruction of Marshall Hall. They've been doing a lot of work doing exercises downtown to learn of different options there. So we still have field opportunities occurring, but they are reduced because of that limitation on the number of people that can be on a bus. Just so you know, when people do use campus vehicles, everybody's wearing a mask. We track what seat the students are sitting in order to, if we have to do contact tracing. So we're being extremely cautious in pretty much everything we're doing to try and ensure the safety of your students.
great, thank you so much. I know that there are a few more questions, but I'd like to just turn it over to Dean Lombard for now to talk about student life and anything about any way we can virtually engage with our virtual students as well. I know that there might be some in this chat. So we'll kick it over to Dean Lombard.
Great, thanks so much, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Ann Lombard, and it's my privilege to serve as the Vice Provost and Dean for Student Affairs at ESF, which is just a long way of saying that I have the opportunity and privilege to work with a great team of people in our Division of Student Affairs who coordinate many of the programs and resources and activities that are available to students outside the classroom. And we know now more than ever how important that is, that we find ways to connect our students. So within our Division of Student Affairs, we have a number of programs and resources that are still available to students, but in a different capacity. So we're still able to offer counseling services, but we do that in a telecounseling way. We offer career advising and career coaching, resume review, and assistance. And again, we can do that in a virtual way. We also offer student support. And we can do a lot of the work that we would probably prefer to do in person, but we can provide those services to your students in a virtual way. We can also meet with students. Most of our offices in student affairs do allow for face-to-face meetings. So in fact, we regularly see students in our office, which I will say I'm very happy about. It's hard to be on a college campus as a student affairs person and not get to interact with students. But another program and resource that's available to your students is tutoring. All of our tutoring this semester is being done in a virtual way through online study groups and in other ways. So I would give your students and you the same advice this semester that I would for any regular semester, and that students need to be their own best advocates. And when they need assistance, to not be afraid to ask for that, and not be afraid to reach out to those offices and departments and units that are here to serve and assist them. And I would say that's more important than ever, because we don't have the opportunity to kind of assess students, through their body language and through changes in behavior as they're coming to class. So do encourage your students to reach out, to not be afraid, as Provost Newman indicated, to reach out to faculty members, to reach out to staff members who are here to be of assistance to them. So it's been a little challenging for us to think of creative ways to engage our students in kind of this virtual reality in which we're living. But every week we send out a newsletter to our students called Okies Ops, which highlights all of the activities and programs that are going on campus. And there are plenty of things that are still happening in a virtual way, so presentations and speakers and other things. We did, for our new students, find a way to kind of replicate our activities fair that we traditionally do in the beginning of the semester. All of our student organizations put together information and short videos about themselves, and that was sent out to our new students. And I'll ask Laura to share that link in the chat for this group so that so you can see the kinds of things that are still happening. So, is it what we would like for it to be? No, of course, we would rather be interacting with your students and having them interact with each other, but we are finding ways to connect them. We are able to gather in small groups as long as we follow, New York State guidelines about gathering. So we're looking at ways that we can offer more outdoor programming while the weather remains nice, and there's some small group programming taking place in the residence hall and so on. So let me stop there, see if there are questions about anything specifically that I might answer, and happy to answer any at any point in this time together.
Thank you so much, Dean Lombard. I do want to encourage you all to also raise your hand, or I could unmute your mic so you could ask questions. I am getting some folks asking me private questions, which it actually is a little difficult to keep track of. But I do know that there is a couple questions about Centennial Hall, and if there is any opportunity to waive out. If not, can you talk a little bit about some of perhaps the programming that they're doing in the building, and then also just general programming as well?
Sorry, Laura, can you repeat that?
Sure. Can you talk a little bit about Centennial Hall? And I know that there was a question about waiving out of, and unfortunately that is not an option anymore.
Yes.
But can you talk a little bit about how to, the programming that is going on at Centennial Hall, and maybe advice you might give a parent or a family member who might have a student who's not making connection and feeling a little homesick?
Yeah, thanks for that. I was scrolling the chat to see what we were missing, so I should have been paying more attention to you. I apologize. You know, it is challenging for our resident assistant staff and for our staff who live in Centennial to do programming, but they probably more than almost anyone know the importance of doing that. And so RAs are gathering people in small groups and trying to connect them in those ways. We've had a lot of outreach from parents and families saying, hey, and I've seen activity in the parents Facebook group, for example, about, oh, here's my student's information and I'll have them reach out to your student. I mean, it's really, I've said this in many kind of different contexts, but it's one student at a time really right now. It's one student, one interaction at a time, whatever we can do to try to connect people to each other. So as it relates to Centennial Hall and the housing contract, you're right. We did give, and Provost Newman alluded to this, but we did give our students 2 opportunities to choose to go all online with their class schedules and to be released from their housing obligation for the fall semester. And that second deadline has passed, and we are holding students to we have to be able to plan and to move forward. And so I think, it was the right thing to do for us to allow students to make that decision if that fit best for them. But at this point, that window of opportunity to waive out of housing has passed for the semester.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's see here. Are there plans to assure that engagement in available programs and services are communicated to students? Can you touch on that a little bit?
We do communicate with students very regularly. As I mentioned, the Okies Ops email that goes out, those opportunities are also shared through our social media outlets. There is a campus news update that goes out every day from our Office of Communications. And we, individual offices like our Office of Career Services, for example, has a newsletter that they send out. While it's challenging sometimes for students to hear this, I can't stress enough the importance of them checking their email on a regular basis. Email is the official means of communication by the college to our students, and there is all kinds of information that is sent out using email as the primary source and then shared on our Instagram page and our Facebook page and other pages. But a lot of information is being communicated to students, but that's the primary vehicle that we use.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that some of the COVID emails or all of the COVID updates are also right on the homepage. So a lot of emails are posted in a variety of locations that are really important ones.
That's a great reminder, Laura. And for our parents and families listening in who might not be aware of that, right on the college's homepage, www.esf.edu, right in the middle of that at the top is the link to the COVID page. And every update that's made to students via email is posted there. There's testing information there. Our dashboard is there with our statistics and so on. So a lot of important information that can be found there.
Yeah, absolutely. A question came up, which I know unfortunately Amelia Hoffman, who is our academic success coordinator, couldn't join us today. She had another commitment. But can you touch a little bit on specifically how to find and sign up for tutoring for a specific class or just in general as well?
Yeah, that's at the tutoring website. And maybe while I'm talking, Laura, if you could put that URL in the chat, students can link to tutoring right off the webpage and they'll get assigned to a group. That I would say that's one maybe good thing about this is that there are a lot of opportunities for them to get connected with groups. All of our tutoring is done in small groups at no additional charge to students. And as I said, Laura will put that URL in the chat for you, but that's also shared with our students. And all of that tutoring is done by upper class students who have done well in the classes. And it's a great resource. I mean, our students have reported strong satisfaction with the tutoring that they receive from our peer tutors.
That's right. Absolutely. Okay. I know that there is definitely some questions about the start of a family newsletters, and so we are slowly working on that. We actually are new to that. We would always send out summer newsletters for the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, but we don't have a family or parent and family office. We all kind of share that work, because everyone's office is so different. So I know I'm speaking only for instance, Mark or our bursar's office, that they have timely communication to students. And so, Dean Lundberg, can you touch a little bit more on how families should best approach communicating with the college beyond the family newsletter we're going to launch?
You know, and I know parents and families aren't necessarily going to like this answer, but we do most of our communication with our students. So we have legal obligations to treat your 18-year-old students as adults, and to communicate with them. And in fact, we have some restrictions on what we can communicate with parents, but we do, I do regularly talk with parents, as do all of my colleagues, and we'll share as much information as we can with you. But as Laura said, we're moving toward developing family newsletters, which we're very excited about. We know that more than ever, this information is important. But you know, a great place to start is in our Office of Student Affairs if we can be of assistance to you or help to get you connected with the right office or person. We are happy to do that. But as I said, our primary kind of point of contact is with our students.
Thank you so much for clarifying that. A question that came up is about housing contract. Will another housing contract be sent out for spring semester?
So that's a great question. And students actually signed a housing contract for the year when they signed their housing contract for Centennial Hall. What we allowed students to do twice, as I mentioned, as Provost Newman mentioned, is to be released from their fall semester obligation. So all students, with the exception of those who live within a certain radius of campus, are expected to live in our residence hall for the first year. That's not an unusual requirement on college campuses, but what we determined, it was the right, as I said, the right thing to do to allow students to be released from their fall semester obligation, but they are still held to their spring semester obligation. And as Provost Newman indicated, we don't know yet what spring semester is going to look like. And we don't know yet whether or not there will be a similar opportunity to be released from their spring semester contract. So sorry, that was a long way of saying students already have a spring semester contract because they signed a contract for the year.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure that more information will be coming about spring semester, and will include a lot of everything that I think is on a lot of people's minds. I do see some questions about FERPA, and I know that right now we are getting, we have been switching over to Banner, which is our new student user program. And while I'm speaking, I'll ask Mark Hill, who's our Director of Financial Aid, to get he actually has a presentation for us about financial aid. So if Mark wants to get that ready, that would be great. But there is question about FERPA, and unfortunately with some of the transition to this new platform, some of that has not been fully operationalized. I don't know if there's been any updates with that in the last couple of weeks, but I suspect it's still a work in progress. As soon as it is up and running and fully working, I am sure that more information will go out to students and families of emails we have for families. Another announcement was that we are working on the family newsletters, and so if you are not on that listserv, just email me. There's also a QR code which will go right into our listserv, but I can't find that link quickly while I'm trying to manage the chat. So just email me and I'll add you to that. And then the last question I'm seeing that is related to what we were talking about with tutoring. Yes, tutoring did start. It looks like tutoring began on September 7th, but the peer tutoring link, as you know, is virtual, and that sign up link is right on the tutoring main page, or that link was posted by me as well. So it has started. Again, encouraging your student to go from, possibly not a passing grade to a passing grade, or from that minus to an A. We see all sorts of students coming for tutoring. So it is not simply to get to a passing grade. It could be to go from a, even an A minus to an A. So yeah, let's turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit about financial planning and all life financial aid. Mark, take it away.
Great. Thank you very much, Laura. Hopefully you can all see my screen here. I will apologize up front for doing a slideshow. I will, though, promise as well that this will be fairly quick. I'm going to move through them pretty quickly, but this is as much for me to keep on track as much as it is to show you what I'm talking about. I started just a little bit about where I came from. I started at ESF officially in 2003. And actually started here a little bit before that. I was working in a program at Syracuse University and had an internship right in this office that I'm working in now. So I got a chance to get to know people and went away for a few years of experience and was then lucky enough to come back, and been here ever since. So what I wanted to do is try to sort of follow the theme of the academic side of things tonight, and also share some information with parents, which you may not always hear, because this again is one of those things that we tend to share directly with the students, but that as you talk with your children about college and planning out their time here will be very important for you to know as well. So I wanted to start with a couple of quick policies that you'll want to be aware of. And as you might imagine, maintaining academic progress is really important in terms of maintaining financial aid eligibility. But as you may have seen so far, financial aid is very complex, and there are so many different sources of funding and different programs out there that they can all have different rules. So I want to give you a rough idea of kind of the general things that we encourage our students to shoot for when it comes to the classes they're taking and how they're performing in those classes. So with the federal programs, these have the most extensive requirements in terms of categories. So obviously students need to maintain certain grade requirements. As a general rule, it's very important for students to at least maintain a 2.0 cumulative GPA to maintain eligibility for all of the different federal programs. There are cases where the GPA can be below that, but then it puts a lot of pressure on the student to get the GPA up. So shooting for that 2.0 as a minimum is really important. Also, students don't always realize that they have to maintain a pace of how many classes they complete. So in a general sense, again, students need to be completing at least 2/3 of the courses that they attempt. So a student who is signed up for 4 courses or 12 credits or so, if they drop a couple of those courses during the course of a semester and don't finish them, they could be in a situation where they may lose eligibility for aid in the future. So it's really important that students talk to their advisors and talk with the Student Affairs Office before they make any decisions about changes to what they're doing for coursework. And of course, they can come to talk to us about what the impact on financial aid might be. And then lastly, on the federal side, there are actually what are known as maximum time frame rules, which basically prevent a student from continuing in school as long as they want. And what that says is that a student has to complete their degree before they have attempted more than 150% of the credits required for their program. So for most of our students, it's about 120 to 126 credits for a bachelor's degree. So if a student has attempted over about 185 to 190 credits and still has not earned the degree, they could lose eligibility from that point forward. So those are the 3 big rules for the federal side. On the state side, fewer categories, but it gets a little bit more complicated. Again, in terms of grade requirements for the state, we're looking at 2.0 as the main target to shoot for. In terms of completion requirements, it gets a lot more strict. And in the first couple of years, there's a little bit of flexibility, but for the most part, students need to basically be completing a full-time course load if that's the way they have started their semester. So an example there would be a student who starts with 12 credits and needs to drop a course during the semester. That might affect eligibility for the following semester that the student's going to be enrolled. So that can be a real tricky one. And then lastly, on the institutional side, we really don't have any rules with regards to the time frame or the pace of completion, but for a lot of our awards, we do have grade requirements. So it's important that the students know what type of institutional aid they're receiving and what type of grade requirements they are. In general, any kind of merit scholarship, which would typically be the ESF Presidential or the ESF National Scholarship, we are looking for a 3.0 cumulative GPA. And for most other types of institutional aid, we require a 2.5 cumulative GPA. And if you're looking for any late night reading to help you go to sleep tonight, you can go to the website there, which is where all of our different progress policies are listed. I'll warn you, it can get very complicated, so don't go into that thinking it's a quick read. You may need to pour through it a bit. But if you follow those general guidelines, or if the student does, things will go really well. Another big thing that's become a hot topic in financial aid is what we like to call required coursework, or it might also be called applicable coursework for students. Don't feel you need to read this. What I wanted to do though is give you the actual wording that both the federal and state aid programs provide related to this. And I'll give you the rundown really quickly of what it is. Basically, the idea is that in order to qualify for financial aid, students have to be taking courses that are required for them to obtain their degree. So in a nutshell, what that means is if a student wants to take courses they don't need and learn more about various interests they may have, if they're not required for their degree, they can't count towards financial aid eligibility. So what that means is if a student wants to do something like that, they need to plan that very carefully and make sure that they are taking those courses at a time when they're also taking enough other required coursework to meet the requirements for eligibility. So to give you another rough idea on that, when we talk about the federal loan programs in terms of student and parent federal loans, the work study program, and the supplemental educational opportunity grant program, basically half-time enrollment is the minimum required for a student to be eligible, and amounts can be prorated if a student is not at 12 credits or more. So depending on how many, you could see changes in the aid eligibility, but staying at least 6 credits of required coursework is going to be a key there. Also in the federal aid programs, if a student qualifies for the Pell Grant program, there can be eligibility for less than half-time, which would be anything below 6 credits. And again, it'd be prorated for the students in those cases. Again, with the state, things get a little more strict when it comes to what they require. For almost all the programs, full-time enrollment each semester in degree applicable coursework is required. And that usually is going to mean 12 or more credits. This can get a little tricky for our students, especially if they're bringing in a lot of transfer credits. So what you want to look at and have the students talk about with their advisors is how many credits did they bring in that actually apply to their degree already. And as they look at what's called their plan sheet, they'll be able to see where those transfer credits or AP credits may fall. And that can help a student plan out what they're going to do. And what can be difficult is sometimes these transfer credits or AP credits can show up and take an elective spot in the student's plan sheet. And that basically takes away flexibility for the students to take a lot of different courses. And if they're not careful, they can end up in a situation where maybe a course they need is not offered in a given semester, and that can make it difficult for the student to actually meet those requirements. So the main idea here is that it's important for students and families to know that you don't want to limit yourself to planning one semester at a time. It's really important that you look at the entire plan for the time that the student plans to be at ESF and try to look out at what courses are available and what might be required and see if you can fit all of them into each semester to make sure you meet the requirements. So the state aid is going to look at 12 credits or more each term. They do offer a little bit of flexibility in the last 2 terms of a student's program. These are called the final term exceptions. And what happens there is if a student doesn't have enough credits to meet those requirements in those last 2 terms, they can take what is required, and then they can also take other non-required coursework to make sure they're still at 12 credits. So in the second to last term, a student has to be taking at least 6 required credits and then can take any other number of credits that are not required to get up to 12. And in the final term, they can take any number of required credits and then others that are not to get up to 12. So as you look at these planning options, that can give a little bit of flexibility, but just take note that the state aid exceptions do not apply to the federal financial aid. So that can sometimes put a student into a tough spot. We get a question a lot about what about minors when it comes to required coursework, and unfortunately minors do not count as required unless the minor is required as part of the degree program, which we have very minimal times when that is the case. Also, repeat courses can have an impact here. So a student on the state aid side can repeat a course one time if the course was not passed or didn't meet the graduation requirements. But once that one time is tried, then there's no more opportunity to repeat a course. On the federal aid side, a student can repeat as many times as is necessary to get a passing grade, and then can take the course one more time to try to improve their grade. One little note there, while the student can continue to repeat a course for federal aid, don't forget about those maximum time frame requirements. If a student keeps doing that, they might run into that sort of a limit and lose eligibility anyway. So one last thing on the state aid, I know there are a lot of questions about the Excelsior Scholarship. So before I get into an update there, I just want to mention how the credit requirements work there. So just like the other state programs, 12 degree applicable credits each term is going to usually be the requirement. But also for the students in this program, they have to complete at least 30 degree applicable credits each year. And this, it has been clarified to mean on average. So an example there, if a student completes 31 credits in the first year, they could then complete 29 credits in the second year and still be eligible as long as they're still doing the 12 credits each term. So you don't want to, again, go into this thinking just 12 credits a term, because then obviously you'd be at 24 and you wouldn't meet the requirement. So this is where AP credits or transfer credits may help out. And also this program does allow for summer coursework to count during the year. And those same final term exceptions apply to the Excelsior program as well. And in those final terms, the 30 credit requirement does not apply anymore, because obviously if a student doesn't need 30 credits, they can still qualify, and they just have to make sure they finish the credits needed for the degree. So how do we kind of track all of this? This is a really important one. Our office will wait until after the 4th week of each semester, which is typically the drop deadline for students to make any decisions about courses they might be dropping. That's when we'll look at whether a student is maintaining the right number of credits for the semester to maintain their eligibility. And there are cases where if a student is not doing it, they could have aid change at that point. So again, that communication part is really important. The students need to be working with their advisors and kind of planning this all out. And with also, with many of these state programs, they don't allow certification of the awards until a semester has ended, which basically means you may see a financial aid source showing up in an aid package and on a bill until the end of the semester. And if we go to certify a student at that point and it turns out that they did not meet the requirements, that aid can be taken away at that point, and then the family or student would owe it back to the college because we'd have to return it to the state. This happens quite a lot with the STEM scholarship and the Excelsior scholarship, because we don't know what a student has completed until that term is over, or in some cases we don't know until the summer is over. So again, communication, reach out to the financial aid office. We keep planning sheets for each student. So if they ever want to come in and find out where they stand, we can certainly show them where their credits are and what they might need to do. Now for some updates I'm sure everyone's anxious for. I'm afraid to say I don't have anything that's really new when it comes to the status of state aid. You can see there the guidance that has been given by the state with regards to Excelsior. This is also sounding like this is going to apply to other state programs as well. And this could basically apply to students who are new to the programs. And this is very, very vague right now. The guidance we are being given is that they don't really know what's going to happen yet. They are really, I think, watching what the federal government is going to be able to do to support the states. So at this point, they are not processing any Excelsior scholarships. For those of you who have students new to the program or new to ESF, you are not seeing that in an aid package or on a bill because the state has not made any awards there. So we're trying to stay optimistic on that, and we're hoping for the best, but we also think it's prudent to give guidance that families should plan as best as they can for that not to be there until we know more about it. We've had a lot of questions from the beginning of the semester in terms of aid showing up in the billing. And I think by and large, for the most part, we have all the aid that should be appearing on the bills there. There was a delay at the very beginning, but we got most of that resolved fairly early on after the bills started to come out. One thing that's been a little bit confusing for families, though, is the difference between pending aid and paid aid. And when you look at the bill in the actual detail section, you'll see the individual charges for the student, which would list tuition and fees and so forth. And you'll see any financial aid that has paid, which is typically going to be the institutional aid or the federal aid. But there's also what's known as pending aid, which does not show in those transactions because it actually hasn't paid to the college yet. And that's because a lot of those sources of state aid and some others don't come to the college until much later in the year. So they will show as pending aid and they won't reduce the balance. But if you look at the very top of the bill as you're looking at it, you'll see a total amount of pending aid, which you can deduct from the balance owed when you're determining how much to pay. I know that's been confusing, and we've been talking with the Bursar's office, which handles that about it, and they are working on programming with the vendor to try to get those summary amounts to actually deduct the pending aid. So hopefully soon that will look a lot more clear for you. And then lastly on this, SU meal plan bills. I'd like to take every opportunity I have to remind families about the SU meal plan bills, which are sent separately from anything that ESF does. And that's because we don't provide them, we don't contract with the students for those. So we do include estimated expenses for meal plans in our aid packages. So family students can receive enough to cover that, but we cannot disperse aid and apply it automatically to the SU bill on your behalf. So instead, what happens is if you have enough financial aid coming in, it will pay off the ESF charges first, and then the excess would be refunded to the student or a parent, which you could then use to pay that SU meal plan bill. So if your student hasn't taken a look at that yet, they would do the same method we use where they send an email notification, and then the students would need to sign into the MySlice portal to be able to see those bills. All right, almost done, I promise. So good time right now, believe it or not, to start planning for next year. And this always comes up as a surprise for me too, because it seems like the year's going so fast. It's not a bad time to be thinking about what housing options the students want to look at for next year. There are certainly opportunities to try to stay in Centennial Hall if the students would like to do that. And a lot of our students also look at off-campus housing options. One of the big questions we get there is, how do we pay for off-campus housing? Can we get financial aid to assist with that? And the answer is absolutely yes. Student can get financial aid. The process is basically the same. We use slightly different estimates for housing and meal plan costs or food costs when a student's off campus, but we still offer financial aid. And the only real difference is a student's ESF bill will not have housing charges on there. They won't have an SU meal plan bill unless they sign up for that. And therefore, if they have a lot of aid coming in, that could potentially give a much larger refund, which then the student would receive to be able to pay their rent or buy their food at the grocery store or whatever they want to do. So definitely there can be support for off-campus housing if the students want to pursue that. And coming up very soon, October 1 is the opening date for the FAFSA for next year. If anyone's not aware, it is required every year that be completed. So as soon as you can after October 1 is a good time to go out and try to do that. And then also the application for the state programs will be available at the same time. Sometimes people don't realize they have to do that separate. The TAP application is the main application, which is also known as the application for payment of state grants and scholarships, as you see there. That's important to do for students that are in other programs like Excelsior or the STEM grant program, because that has to be done before those can pay off. And last but not least, I always like to point out, if you're not aware of it, we try to make sure the students know that there are a lot of online courses available right through our website that are provided through a SUNY partnership. which cover all kinds of topics with regards to financial literacy. So this is available to our current students, our prospective students, and even high school students that might want to learn more about financial literacy. And these are just some of the types of courses that are out there. So what a student can do anytime they'd like, here's a screenshot of our financial aid website. You can see on the bottom right there where it says Smart Track. A student can click there and that'll take them right to a page where they can then flow right into all these different tools. A student can create an account so they can track their progress. And some of our orientation seminars are actually looking at using these and making them assignments for our students. So if you're like me and you feel like there's kind of a gap between secondary and post-secondary education in terms of helping students understand financial literacy, this may be a great place to advise your students to take a look and see what they can find. And that is what I wanted to cover here. I'm sure I probably have a lot of questions that I can hopefully address for folks. And otherwise, I thank you. I'm gonna stop my sharing.
Thank you very much for the thorough presentation, Mark. I really appreciate it. I do see, let's see, a question that was about Excelsior. I'm sure it's hard to say, it would depend on guidance from the Fed and state government, but is there a way, any precedent for this or other situation where this has happened if Excelsior does not come through, I think?
Well, I have never seen or heard of anything like this, to be honest. The worst I've ever heard of is long delays in state aid being available to help fund these. This is certainly a unique situation, and I can't say that I'm not worried about the status of the state aid opportunities here. So what I can say is that we'll continue to monitor the situation, and we're hopeful that we'll get news as soon as possible, but it's somewhat political, I think, and it's just a very tough situation for everybody. And I think kind of related, I saw one question pop up here about what happens if everything gets paid and then Excelsior comes in after the fact. And I can assure everyone that that would be handled just like any other financial aid process. So basically, if the bill is paid, or there's only a small balance and financial aid comes in that is in excess of the balance, that would be refunded to the student. So if you pay everything and then you get Excelsior, we're not going to take it away just because you paid your bill. You would still be eligible for that funding. That being said, be aware that if a financial aid package is filled up with all the different sources and something comes in after, that can have an impact on other sources of aid. So usually that would be loans or work study would be changed, but there are some cases where duplicative benefits, as they're called, can be impacted as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all the kudos to our presenters as well. I really appreciate their very busy season this time of year. I'm assuming I missed a couple questions purely by accident because I do have a lot of private messages too. So I want to give anyone an opportunity to unmute their mic and just ask their question to either Mark, Dean Lombard, or Provost Newman on any questions that, again, deal with academic life, student life, or financial aid. We'll go a few minutes past 8 o'clock. I know I want to be respectful of bedtimes and whatnot. So I say that I have 3 young children. So, but yes, if anyone wants to unmute, that's totally fine. We like hearing your question verbally too.
Said, have you gotten into any tutoring? So during any orientation, I was told it starts this week. They're still working on figuring stuff out. And I said, okay, administration says otherwise, jump in when you can. It's really good to do, not just when in fear of failing.
Hi, I'm not sure if that question happened or not. Can you repeat the question? Okay, I still don't see any questions. I do see some information about RAs. Centennial Hall does a great job with recruitment. There is a pretty extensive process from individual and group interviews to make sure that you understand working with a group and a team as well as individual students. So they do that in the fall and then wrap up those decisions typically in the spring. So always be on the lookout for emails and flyers on that. Again, want to encourage anyone to unmute their mic or just ask any final questions. We'll go just again a few more minutes. Again, I know that we talked a little bit about academic life at the beginning with our provost. Yes, this has been recorded. We are still recording and it will get posted in a variety of locations so that we want, if you missed it or tuned in late, we have that set up for you all. We'll probably put it on YouTube just so that we could close caption it too. So we have a question. What if a student has reached out to their advisor and not gotten a response? What should they do? I think that's a great question for our provost.
If they've tried to contact their advisor and have not been responded to, they should contact the department chair. And the department chair will let that advisor know that they have to talk with their advisees. So that's the simplest. If they can't figure out who their chair is, they can send me a message and I'll make sure that it gets to the chair. My email is dnewman@esf.edu.
Since we're talking about advising, Dr. Newman, can you talk a little bit about what a family member should encourage their student to do when it comes time to do advising in general? And specifically, I know we'll have some advising coming up in a blink of an eye. I know it's already week 4, but can you talk a little bit about that process?
So, excuse me, advising will take place, it's the last week of October. And in general, the way it works is that the advisor will send out messaging to the students to schedule a time for advising. We require all students to be advised prior to registering for classes for the next semester. And so sometimes we have proactive students who contact the advisor earlier and say, I would like to get some advising, but generally the advisors will contact the students to set up times. Now, we don't have a standard policy with respect to advisors. Some departments have professional advisors in that they have responsibility for easily over 100 students. Other programs use faculty members as advisors, and also we offer for the professional advisors, they're generally just advising for the first 2 years, and then they have a faculty advisor for the last 2 years. And so it can be tricky, but for the most part, I would say not all faculty are as good advisors as others. And so the key here is that students need to take control of their own programs. And if they're not satisfied with what the advisor is doing for them, if they're not contacting them or other things, what they should do is contact the department chair, and the department chair will find a new advisor for them. It happens, doesn't happen very often, but we're happy to do that. Again, I was the department chair for over 10 years. That happened maybe 10, 20 times over that whole time period. So, part of navigating a student's way through college is taking control of their own program, working with faculty to get the best out of their program.
Thank you so much. We just had a consideration get sent out about waving out of or Centennial Hall. So I do know that that was a comment, but not a question as much. So I do want to end, because I haven't seen any other questions come on, with one quick tip of advice from all three of our panelists. I know that a few, or at least I should own, Dr. Newman has had one student in college. I know the others are not there yet, myself included. So if we could all end with one quick tip, that would be really great. I'll start with our provost, since you're the most close to us now.
I'm past it. I'm through it. I thought I was through with my kids in college, but now they keep on doing it. So I think, like I said, the really difficult thing for students to get a handle on is truly taking control of their own program. We try and instill that in our students, that it's their degree, not the faculty members, not anybody else's. It's their degree, and so they should take responsibility for it, and really work with our faculty. And in my experience, those students who come in knowing what they want to do and are able to express it clearly to their faculty member what they want to do, faculty member is happy to work with them. Those are the students we like to have, because they're fully engaged. And so if a student is having a problem in the class, do their best to meet during office hours, to talk with the faculty member, because that's what they're there for. That's what they're supposed to be dealing with. And so, but I tell you, it's the hardest thing. A lot of students are intimidated by professors. They feel that, they don't want to bother them. But I'm not saying that they should be hanging out at their door every day, but that they should be willing to go forward, talk with the professor, and get to know them. Because frankly, when they finish, they're often going to need references, and the professors that students have had a direct interaction with, and that the professor can talk about that student, those are the ones that can write good references.
Thank you. That's great advice. All right, we will go over to Dean Lombard.
Thanks, Laura. I would add to Provost Newman's advice and say, again, that students need to be their own best advocates. So not just in terms of advocating for their program of study, but seeking out and advocating when they need assistance. Taking advantage of faculty office hours, getting to know them, but also getting connected with offices like financial aid and with the variety of resources available in student affairs. We can't always know when students need help. We're here and want to help and have the resource, but we don't always know when they need it. So students need to take responsibility and become their own best advocates, and that will help them to be successful.
Perfect, thank you. And we'll end with Mark.
Well, thank you. I'll probably be repeating a lot of what you've heard already, but I have two big things I would say. One is I can't stress enough the need for good communication, and not just, talking when things are going on, but an awareness that you don't want to assume that what you know, the student knows. And more importantly, you don't want to have the student assume that what they know, you as a parent know. There's very many things we're going to be saying to the students and providing to them that if they don't realize they need to share that with you, they may not. So ask them questions, ask them what's going on, ask them what kind of notices they're receiving. There's one we send out every year, which is a reminder to do the AID application, and right in big red letters at the top, we say, you might want to share this with your parents. And a lot of them still don't do it. So ask those questions, get that information. And I really liked what the first two presenters said about being comfortable getting to know us. I got an email from a student just the other day, and the first thing she asked was, I hope you don't mind me calling you Mark, because that's the way you sign your emails back to me. And anytime someone calls me Mr. Hill, I just don't feel comfortable with it. I've never had that approach. Most of the time we're in person, I'm wearing a tie, but it's just because I feel like I need to kind of, fake it that I know what I'm talking about. So please encourage your students to come in and be friendly. Don't be afraid to come in, especially when it comes to financial aid and billing. It can be very intimidating, but normally we have an open door policy. And if I see someone in the hall, if they come in, if I'm available, if any one of our staff members is available, we're going to have a smile for them and we'll sit down and we'll talk with them. So please encourage them to feel comfortable doing that, and we will certainly help as much as we can.
Thank you so much. That's great advice. And we can attest to everyone's friendly and warm attitude. And Mark is no exception. I often bump into him on our way to restrooms or meetings. But again, everyone is very friendly and very nice. And we're all here to help you help your students succeed. So really, at the end of the day, that is really what our goal is. So as you know, next week, Monday, the 21st at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is our session on seeing your students and getting internships and careers. So kind of from the beginning end to the hopeful final step is career. I mean, obviously career could mean graduate school before that final career goal, and they do help with that as well. So all of that will be discussed next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you again for tuning in, and a special thank you to our very busy panelists for taking their time again. All the energy has been really great this semester. So I think you're in good hands, but thank you again.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good night.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.